Joni Lamb is gone. May 7th, 2026. She was 65 years old. I want to sit with that for a moment before I say anything else. Because a woman has died. A mother, a grandmother, a builder, a broadcaster, a human being made in the image of God, who gave 40 years of her life to something she genuinely believed in. And whatever else must be said today, and there is something that must be said, we start there. Not with the controversy, not with the recordings, not with the documented record. We start with the fact that a woman died, and that is not a small thing. While she was still alive, that grace was still available, that the door was still open, that God was still working, that restoration was still possible. I do not know what happened in whatever room she was in her final days. I do not know what conversations occurred, what prayers were prayed, what was said between her and God. That is not mine to know, and I will not speculate about it. What I know is what the documented record shows, and what the gospel says about the God who is present in every room. Joni Lamb is gone. Let us begin there. And let us be honest about everything that follows. Before the controversy, before the recordings, before the crisis that consumed these last years, there was a girl from Greenville, South Carolina, born Joni Trammell, July 19th, 1960. Her family were members of the Tremont Avenue Church of God, where a young visiting preacher named Marcus Lamb came to hold a revival. They met at her home church. 2 years later, in 1982, they were married. They traveled for years as evangelists, driving from church to church, believing they were called to something larger. In 1984, they settled in Montgomery, Alabama. They purchased a television station on broken equipment. They launched it at 3 a.m., and they built, from essentially nothing, what would become one of the largest Christian television networks in the world. Daystar said Lamb had been privately battling significant health issues before suffering a recent back injury that intensified her medical condition. The back injury compounded those challenges and led to a more serious medical situation than anyone had anticipated. Despite the dedicated efforts of her medical team and the prayers of so many around the world, her condition worsened in the last few days. Daystar stated, "We know that she is in the presence of Jesus, reunited with Marcus and receiving her reward for a beautiful life lived in surrender to the Lord." That is what the network she built said about her. I am not going to dispute the sincerity of that statement. She built something real. Whatever else is true, she built something real. And today, that is worth naming first. There are 3 children who woke up this morning without a mother. Jonathan Lamb, Rachel Lamb Brown, Rebecca Lamb Weiss. Each of them in very different circumstances, carrying very different weights into this day. Rachel and Rebecca, who have been holding the Daystar set together these past weeks, who showed up every day, who smiled into cameras, who made mac and cheese on air while the world was watching their family fracture, they are motherless today. Whatever the complexity of what happened, they are daughters who have lost their mother. And that grief is real. And it is not complicated by the documented record. It is just grief. And Jonathan, who was fired by his mother for refusing to call her the voice of God. Jonathan, who watched private investigators follow his family. Jonathan, who lost his salary, his title, his inheritance for trying to protect his daughter. Jonathan woke up this morning without a mother too. And I do not know what that grief looks like. I do not know what it feels like to lose a parent in the middle of the kind of conflict they were in. But I know that grief in those circumstances is not simple. It is layered. It is heavy. It carries things inside it that have no clean name. Joni is survived by her husband, Doug, as well as her 3 children, Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca, and their families. The family has asked for prayers and privacy in the days ahead. Jonathan is part of that family. He is in that request for privacy. And today, this channel honors it. Now, I need to say something that is harder to say today than it was yesterday. Not because it is less true, but because death changes the register in which truth must be spoken. The documented record does not change because Joni Lamb has died. The governance failures at Daystar are documented. The accountability vacuum is documented. The firing of Jonathan and Susie for refusing to call Joni the voice of God is documented. The GPS tracker in Jonathan's car, the private investigators, the salary that jumped 140% after Marcus died, all of it is documented. The allegations involving their grandchild, reported extensively by Julie Roys at the Roys Report, those allegations remain before the people and the processes that must evaluate them. A Texas police department declined to file charges and closed its investigation into allegations of abuse involving the founding family of Daystar. The investigation is closed. The questions it raised are not answered simply by its closing. Joni Lamb's salary at Daystar jumped to over $1 million following Marcus Lamb's death. Joni Lamb also faced allegations of financial misconduct for using a Daystar credit card to pay for her $100,000 honeymoon with husband Doug Weiss in 2023. I am not saying these things to prosecute a dead woman. I am saying them because the people who were harmed by what happened at Daystar are still alive. Jonathan and Susie Lamb are still alive. Their daughter is still alive. The donors who gave faithfully to a network that claimed church status to avoid financial disclosure, they are still alive. And the documented record that exists to serve those people does not get buried with the person at the center of it. That is not cruelty. That is the honest condition of accountability journalism, and it is what this channel has always said it would hold. There is something that must be said today that I do not think any other channel will say clearly enough. And I want to say it with all the pastoral restraint this moment requires. Joni Lamb died in the way that the Moses model always ultimately claims its apex. Not as a verdict, as an observation about systems. The system she inhabited, the system Marcus built, that she inherited, that she enforced, was a system with no graceful exit. In the Moses model, the apex does not retire. The apex does not step down. The apex does not say, I have carried this long enough, someone else must carry it now. In the Moses model, the apex is carried out. There is deep sadness in that. Not judgment, sadness. Because Joni Lamb was 65 years old. She had been carrying a billion-dollar institution with no independent board, no accountability structure above her, no one permitted to say, you are heading somewhere that will cost you more than any platform is worth, through the most turbulent years of her life. The death of Marcus, the remarriage, the family fracture, the public allegations, the departures, the legal proceedings, all of it carried by one woman at the apex of a system that was designed to make her untouchable, and left her, in the end, without anyone whose job it was to protect her. The Moses model did not just harm Jonathan and Susie, it harmed Joni. Daystar said Lamb had worked with leadership to establish an executive team so the ministry would continue uninterrupted. She was planning for continuity right up to the end. Even in illness, she was holding the institution, because the institution had been built to need her. And no one had built the structures that would allow anyone else to carry it. That is not a critique. That is a tragedy. 3 things. First, pray for the Lamb family, genuinely, without agenda, without condition. For Jonathan and Susie, who are grieving a mother in the middle of a documented conflict that has no clean resolution. For Rachel and Rebecca, who are daughters today, not broadcasters, not hosts, not the next generation of a network, just daughters, who lost their mother this morning. For Doug Weiss, whatever the complexity of the documented record around his actions, he is a widower today, and widowhood is not simple. For every viewer, every donor, every faithful person who watched Joni Lamb for years and believed what she was building was being built for them, they are grieving something today too, even if they cannot quite name what it is. Second, do not let grief silence the questions that the documented record requires. This is the hardest thing to hold together, because grief has a natural impulse towards silence, toward letting the dead be remembered only for what was good. And there was good. She built something real. She carried it for 40 years. She loved Marcus Lamb. She raised 3 children inside a ministry she genuinely believed was carrying the gospel to places it would not otherwise reach. That is real. And Jonathan and Susie Lamb are still waiting. Their daughter's story is not resolved by their grandmother's death. The governance failures at Daystar are not repaired by the founder's passing. The donors who deserve transparency about where their money went are not served by a memorial that asks no questions. The most honest thing the church can do today is hold both, the grief and the questions, the loss and the reckoning, the memorial and the record. Third, learn what this moment is teaching. The Daystar Board of Directors said, "Joni's love for the Lord and for the people we serve shaped this ministry from the beginning. We grieve her loss, and we are grateful for the legacy of faith she leaves behind." The network also emphasized that Daystar's mission and programming will continue moving forward. The network will continue. The programming will continue. The institution will find a new apex, or it will find a new governance model. One of those options produces the same fruit the previous model produced. The other produces something different. The most important thing that could happen at Daystar in the days ahead is not a smooth programming transition. It is a genuine structural reckoning with the governance model that brought it to this moment. Not because Joni Lamb was uniquely corrupt, but because the system she inherited and the system she operated was architecturally incapable of protecting the vulnerable. And if that system continues, under new names, with new faces, with new people at the apex, it will produce exactly what it was designed to produce: the same fruit from the same root. I want to say something directly to the people who are watching this and do not know how to feel. If you loved Joni Lamb, if you watched her for years, if her voice was part of your mornings, if you sent her letters, if you gave to the network she built, your grief today is real, and it is not naive, and it is not foolish, and it does not need to be qualified by the documented record. You loved what you believed she was, and some of what you believed was probably true. She was a builder. She was a broadcaster. She was a woman who believed that the gospel was worth giving a life to carry. Grieve that today. You are allowed to. And if you are Jonathan or Susie, or someone who was harmed by what happened at Daystar, your grief today is also real, and it is complicated, and you do not have to pretend that it is simple. Grief over a complicated person is still grief. Loss, even of a relationship that was fractured, is still loss. And the church should make room for both kinds of grief in the same room on the same day. And if you are in a church right now, watching this, wondering whether the institution you are inside looks anything like Daystar, this is the moment to ask that question. Not with panic, not with cynicism, but with the Berean habit of testing what you are being taught against the word. And if what you find does not hold, you are not in rebellion. You are in exactly the place the New Testament placed every believer. There is a line from the 23rd Psalm, the one that has been spoken over more graves than any other words in the English language. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." I do not know what Joni Lamb's final days were. I do not know what she said, what she prayed, what she feared, what she hoped. That is between her and God. And God, the God who said he is not willing that any should perish, that God was present in whatever room she was in. What I know is what the documented record shows about the institution she built, and what that institution must now reckon with. What I know is that 3 children are grieving a mother today in 3 very different ways. What I know is that the questions Jonathan and Susie Lamb have been asking for 2 years do not go away because the person they were asking them of is gone. And what I know, above everything else, is that the gospel does not belong to the institution. It never did. The institution borrowed it and used it and built something real with it and built some things that were not so real. And now, the woman at the center of it is gone. And what remains is the gospel itself, which was here before Daystar, which will be here after it, which does not require a $1 billion appraisal or a private jet or a board of 3 or a voice of God at the apex to do what it has always done. Joni Lamb, born July 19th, 1960, died May 7th, 2026. 65 years. A builder, a mother, a broadcaster. A complicated woman in a complicated institution in a complicated time.
May God have mercy on her. May God comfort her children. May God give the church the wisdom to learn what this moment is teaching. And may the institution she built, finally, be built differently. The documentation for this story is at julieroyce.com. The primary reporting remains there, unchanged by today's news, because the people it serves are still alive. If this episode helped you hold grief and honesty together today, share it with someone who is struggling to do the same. Not to cause alarm, to equip. Subscribe, comment, tell me what you are carrying today. And as always, we keep doing this work together.